Al? Al? Michelle? Terry?
Present.
Michelle let me know that she was unable to come to the meeting tonight, and I appreciate that, okay?
Okay. Dr. Cronin? Kate?
Here.
I'm here. And Juanita?
And me,
Okay.
okay? I want to move on down the agenda because we have a lot to discuss tonight. And I know it's cold outside, and the later we stay here, the colder it gets. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent.
Okay, thank you, Board Chair Cooper. I'm going to move up to the public presentation spot so I can face the wall and look over the PowerPoint presentation. You also have a copy of the handout in front of you, which I think is helpful. And we'll try to go through the budget on the whole. And then maybe if you want to mark some of your questions and we can go back, I think it might be better to kind of do a broad overview and then save some of the questions to the end. I also want to just thank, while we're getting started, the cabinet team for long hours, hard work, 1,000 meetings, and 1,000 meetings more to go with these budgets. We've spent some time talking to all of the departments, all of the school leaders, various administrators, coaches. We've a little bit of time talking with some of our teachers to help them understand kind of where we're at. Had some great discussions today with Oakland Elementary School. But by and large, we have a lot of needs that have bubbled up, things that we knew last year that we were going to need. One of the things I want to kind of come out of the gate with is the term lights on and what that has meant for us in Danbury. Last year, we had a budget ask of 181 million plus. And clearly we knew that that was going to be a challenge, particularly coming off of funding cliffs related to ESSER, but also the increased need that we've had over time with enrollment, post-pandemic needs with students, social emotional learning, and then the increased service needs of students. So this year has been entered into with great optimism, but a lot of the work and a lot of things that are happening right now in the school system in terms of climate and culture and our ability to affect student outcomes will be determined by having a budget that meets the needs of the students, meets the needs of the service needs in every single of our schools, and also the ability for us to be operationally efficient. So the budget that I'll present tonight, we'll talk about those specific drivers in some different areas that really will get us to just only a lights on position, even though the ask is great. Last week, I had an opportunity in the Finance Committee to talk about the drivers without the sticker shock, if you will, of the numbers that come with it. And I think that was helpful in creating a dialogue around some of the need without wrestling with the numbers. But the numbers in here are definitely as impressive as they were last year, but there's certainly the need that we have goes along with that level of our ask. So if you want to go to the first page, Superintendent Proposed Budget, which is page 2, all down here. And it's upside down. And it's also not working. There it is.
No input. Yay! 3 cheers.
Thank you so much. On page 2, you'll see our strategic priorities under teaching and learning, staff development, talent acquisition, school climate, meaningful collaboration, and resource allocation. These align with the goals that we set, the broad categories of the goals and priorities that we set at the beginning of the year. These categories have been in play for the last couple of years, and certainly all the work that we do and the efforts that we have fall largely in these 6 buckets. And our budget this year has been aligned to these categories, and our budget this year will be aligned to those as well. So the budget process this year, as I mentioned last week, was a little bit different from in years past. We had an opportunity for a fresh start. We have a completely brand new finance team that I was happy to get to work with and know this year, especially during this process. We have a lot of things in the budgeting process and development and how we roll forward that are going to be new and improved. And so we're happy to be working through that at the same time as we were developing the budget. The budget this year was developed in a very collaborative manner. We tried to streamline what that process looked like so that we came out of the gate with a nice first clean understanding of our operational needs, our staffing needs, and then we spent several meetings kind of fact checking those and double checking our work to make sure that we got it right. We prioritized our critical need areas, and I will say this, while we were able to meet with every single principal and we had that conversation around needs and wants, this budget really is about, so even though again that the ask is great, it just represents what we need to be functional and operational and in line with the direction of achieving the student outcomes that we set forth at the beginning of the year. We are catching up on year-to-year growth and a decade of underfunding. So, there's one slide in particular that as I'm thinking about this, I wish I placed it in here, but it was what we actually received year over year and what the ask was. So I'll make sure that we make a note to put that slide in there because I think you can see that the ask each year is great, but the need doesn't go away. So just because we don't get funded doesn't mean that the needs aren't still the same and that we're not going to not represent those in the budget for this year. So, I just want to be clear that that's how we're approaching this, and we're still keeping the cards that we need on the table. Our district profile, we have 2 early childhood centers, 13 elementary schools, 3 large middle schools, 1 very large high school, and a new satellite campus coming online with that, and 2 alternative programs. You'll note that we have 38% multilingual learners in the state. That is the highest both percentage-wise, and also we have the largest number of students in the state. So we top the chart in the multilingual learner category. In addition to that 38%, we have about 49% of the students who enroll right now are multilingual learners. So we are outpacing the number of students are growing that are first-time students coming to us, but also multilingual learners in need of services. Our economically disadvantaged number is now 57, and our students with disabilities has eked up a bit to 15. We were at the 14 mark, and we're just on the cusp of 15. So that number is also growing. And our overall enrollment is 12,014, and that is a snapshot as of January 21st.
Since our last meeting, it went up that much?
Yes, this is our pattern. We expect it to go up between now, January, February, are also a time when we receive an influx every year. This year, curious to see what happens with what's happening out there politically, but that is generally when we see an influx around January, February, so there's still likely more to come. See our overall enrollment trends. The green is the 24-25 school year, so we have dipped down a bit, but only because it's not a true our needs have, sorry, she's looking for a response on the fire marshal situation. sorry. Our needs are truly a little bit greater than that. That is a result of our kindergarten, the waiver, and not taking probably about 200 students in that process. We expect to see those students return to us next year in some form. And then as the 12-104 is really what the demographers have projected. If all things hold true, we will also surpass that number as well. That is also our story. Again, you can see the influx and incline in the multilingual learner category. We are at 4,541 and growing, with a projection, if we stay on track, for see that far anymore, 4,630. And then the same is true on SPED. You can see that we're slowly, incrementally bumping up in that arena as well. Key issues and concerns. I think it's no secret that we are struggling to recruit and to retain staff right now. We are focusing in on making sure in this budget that we meet our contractual obligations, keep up with the cost of living, but that we stay competitive. And that's going to be very important right now. There's a lot of folks in the area that are all competing for the same too few staff that exist. Some of that drives up the cost, but in addition to that, we have to make sure that other things in our district operationally are at a level where our staff want to be here and want to stay here. And so what I mean by that is conditions in the classroom. We'll talk about that in another slide. But the number of students that we have in each class, the level of support that we have for teachers, the amount of intervention we're able to provide for students. So in addition to a salary, the conditions are extremely important, and that is something that's affected us greatly this year in particular. We have to absorb the ARPA positions back into the general fund. If you recall, those positions were library and media specialists, those were instructional coaches, specialists, so those were very critical, important positions. And we also used some of that money, and again, there's a slide coming up that will show all this for some of our technological needs. We were very grateful to receive that money at the end of last year, but that money is going away, and that has to be accounted for in this budget. So that's another mini cliff built into this budget. We are opening an academy, a satellite academy, over at the Old Carter site, the DHS West. So it's important to remember that that site exists, not for the sake of having a transformational learning opportunity for kids by itself, but also to help with the enrollment, the exploding enrollment at Denver High School. We believe it's going to be amazing for students, but the genesis, the original genesis, was to serve the purpose of supporting a building that could no longer support the number of students that were coming through, making sure that class sizes and that the facilities could handle the number of students that were there. In addition to DHS West, bringing on another building online creates a whole need to re-tier our transportation and to add additional busing for buses that will span across the city. So there's a good number in our budget reflective of what we'll need to ensure transportation is taken care of. We have some money in to ensure safety and security, to address some basic needs. And again, we have some growing sped costs with some additional special education students, but more along the lines of the cost of doing business and things that are driven up, the tuitions, which are quite costly, and then out-of-district placements that continue to drive up some costs as well. I mentioned remaining competitive and attracting and retaining staff. This is a huge component this year, and it's a very significant ask in our budget, and a very critical one. Our surrounding districts, as I mentioned, raised the pay rate at a faster rate than Danbury has done that. As a result, there's been great disparities in what we're able to offer some of our groups and what area school systems are offering. So we are unable to attract staff to come here in many cases, and we are losing some very key staff to surrounding areas. And there just, quite frankly, isn't anyone applying behind it. The biggest group that we're talking about here are educators. And for those of you who who are not maybe out there, I know this group is a well-informed group about what a paraeducator is, but to the general community, public who might be listening, paraeducators are as a second adult in the classroom, could even be a third in some cases where there's a specific need, particularly with an IEP. But they are helping with small group instruction. They're helping to close gaps in student learning. They're helping to support students to self-regulate. They're helping to provide language supports, native language supports where needed, where we have legally required services that are due to multi-language learners. They could be IEP mandated, so that a student has a particular level of support given their disability. And they're also able to help with when our class sizes are high. So we have a class size of 26 or 27 or even 28 in some places, that a paraeducator can push into support instead of opening another grade level up and putting a teacher in. So we are able to support our current workforce with paraeducators. Any teacher in the district will tell you that a good paraeducator, these paraeducators aren't in the classroom or we cannot backfill them. The climate declines precipitously and causing a host of other issues. We have other staff members that are exhausted from not having repeatedly paraeducators that are supposed to be in supporting the classroom or specific group of students that our absenteeism rate increases when that happens, also drives up our sub costs. So this is a kind of a vicious cycle of not being able to sustain what a particular classroom needs because we cannot get the paraeducators that we need in the district. I think we have currently 40 openings right now-ish across the district. We struggled to fill them last year. So we'll talk to you about an increase to right size our ability to be able to attract and retain in this area. Some of our budget impact will be due to also doing the same with our safety advocates in terms of some of the benefits that are not quite there just yet. I think it's no secret that we've had to hire a service, go outside to an agency at a premium to staff some of our safety advocates. So it's one of those pay now, pay later situations. Right now we're in some areas, also with paraeducators, we're using staffing agencies to help us to fill in some of these gaps. And so one way or another, we end up paying for these services because they're needed. Our district, like many other urban districts, again, we face great challenges. Some of those are class size, the diversity in terms of the learner profiles that we service. So because we have a high number of multilanguage learners, we often, in the same classroom, can be servicing and educating students on a first, second, third grade level, all the way to a sixth, seventh, or eighth grade level. At the high school level, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade can also be found in regular college classes. And it's difficult for the teachers, particularly when the class size number is growing. So that stratification of ability across in one classroom creates a great challenge. And that's one of the things we hear quite a bit. We spend a lot of time in professional development talking about differentiation. And it's one of the hardest things that a teacher can do in a classroom with multiple reading levels across grade level and abilities and languages. Yes.
I was reading Bridgeport is laying off people. Can we tap into that resource?
Oh, who they're laying off?
They're laying off. They have a $32 million shortfall.
I may be placing a phone call. That's a good idea. So these are just some things to consider when as we're presenting our needs. Operational efficiency. So when you don't have enough staff members, our efficiency in how we're able to deliver services across the district, servicing not just students, but how we service teachers and what they need, how we service administrators and what they need, and how we service our support staff across the district and what they need. We, again, have had a very high, in some places, increased staff absences that have driven up sub costs. In today's good example of, we have a lot of illness and sickness and we've had quite a bump across the district in the number of subs that we need, but when we don't have the subs and we can't get subs, it's also very expensive. So when we have a lot of staff absences, because we're getting a lot of teacher call-outs, you're not just dealing with staff absences and the resulting effect of that, not to mention learning loss, but you're dealing with adding more significant costs to the budget, to the bottom line for the day, for the year, with the sub-costs. So ensuring that our classrooms are staffed properly ensures that the teachers will come to school on a regular basis and that the morale stays high so we can keep teaching and learning where it needs to be. In the budget, you'll notice that we have restoring eliminated positions from 24-25. And this is where the lights on comment comes in. We struggled with that term last year, finding a way to talk about the story of what the budget means for folks. Last year, I said we were at a flicker, and it really wasn't a true lights on. And we eliminated, while we only had 2 physical layoffs, if you will, for positions where we couldn't find an open position to physically slide someone into because of a certification issue, it doesn't negate the fact that we eliminated over 68 positions on the back end through the openings that we had. And that felt pretty painless to maybe the community when we did it. But as a district, we feel that pain every day. We feel the lack of the staff across the system that we have. And of the 68 positions, actually that number was higher. We eliminated some because some were no longer needed comparatively to what we need, but the 68 positions were open positions. If you recall, we closed the budget last year when we knew there was some issues by not filling open positions. Over the course of a school year, we've allowed staff to turnover positions, some people come and go. And instead of hiring back into those slots, we made a strategic decision to hold them open with the anticipation that we would not get fully funded at the end of the year. So we did prevent a lot of physical layoffs, but a lot of the folks who were in some of these positions slid into other open positions for which they were certified. So while, again, we only had the headline story of two folks being laid off, out of the need across the district, we had 68 positions that we did not backfill. Some of those were teachers, some of those were coaches, support staff, counselors, the media specialists, some operations staff, and some administrators. If you remember, we eliminated 2 elementary assistant principals, but we're able to find positions for them elsewhere in the district. So that's just an example of the positions we would like to restore where there's great need. Again, not all of them, but we have about 29 that we'll talk about. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. A little bit. So this is just a staffing comparison. This is a snapshot. We compare ourselves quite a bit to Norwalk because we are about the same size. Actually, we just outpaced Norwalk in terms of size. And they're also, comparison-wise, we also trade a lot of staff between Norwalk and Danbury. But when you take a snapshot of Danbury Elementary School of 464, and you compare them to a Norwalk Elementary School of 465, one student different, and mind you, we have 38% multi-language learners at the elementary level, that's even higher. You can see the staffing difference of how they outfit their schools and how we outfit ours. So there's a stark contrast there to the level of support. So when I talk about climate, when I talk about the things that teachers need and principals need in their schools, this is what it looks like. These are the levels of support that schools provide students, specialists that work with students, specialists that work with teachers that are extremely important. We wanted to break out with some questions around how did you spend that ARPA money, that $7.5 million? How are we going to account for this in this budget? So that $7.5 million is reabsorbed into our ask because we have to. The positions that are in here, I'll go through the staffing. So there were some of the existing staff. So if you remember, we restored what was going to be cut in terms of the media specialists. So there were 11 positions there. And then there were 6 instructional coaches. And so we restored those positions in the 11th hour at that 7.5. So those are positions that are now part of our ask for this year. Other instructional improvement, we have the DHS West Campus. So there's some of those operational costs that open the campus. We had an offset of $211,000 for AIS Magnet, and then the DHS staff for enrollment was around $1,337,000 is what we put in to offset. That staff that's on board there now exists and is already at Denver High School from last year. Okay? And they are needed to meet graduation requirements and to meet enrollment. So they're not necessarily academy, that's staff to meet enrollment, and are very much needed. And then on the technology side, we have a hefty replacement cycle. We are 1-to-1, and also we must keep up with infrastructure. So we're going to be 21st century future-ready schools, have our graduates be future-ready. Technology is going to be a significant line item in any budget. And this year, we managed to offset a nice nugget in order to get what we need on our replacement cycle so that our schools can stay on their replacement that has been set up for them. And also, I believe we have some copy machines in here that were desperately needed, one-time funds. So our budget drivers, when we break them out, staff and benefits, the academies make up around $10 million. If you remember, the number that was floating out around for quite a while was that $13 million number. That was kind of corrected a couple of years ago, but also assumes that we're open fully. The grades 10, 11, 12. We're going to be opening grades 10 and 11 in the first year, and we're adding 12 in. 12 will roll up the next year, so we're going to let the seniors stay at Denver High School, and we'll offset only 2 grade levels to go to the academies. That helps a little bit with the enrollment costs, the staffing costs for the enrollment, helps a smidge with the transportation, helps a smidge with some of the other operational costs. It's not going to do much for the other staffing that needs to be there at the building. So you're talking about your custodians, you're talking about your nurses, your operational positions that are needed as a result of opening up a new building. And then where we'll save a little bit is on bringing on some additional staff for enrollment. So we're kind of what we call a slow roll up for next year, which is designed to help a little bit and offset. So staff benefits outside of the academies, around a little over $6 million. Maintenance and utilities in our budget is about $700,000 over last year. Transportation, that number is around $2.2 million. Technology, $318. School lunch, $360. So I'll explain school lunch and why that's up there. The school lunch program has been self-sufficient for many, many years. So when the school lunch program pulls in enough funding to cover the staff that is needed to operate the program. By adding on a different site, a new site, we lose that scale of efficiency. We need to leave basically the school lunch staff that is at Danbury High School right where it is, and we have to restaff this new site. So you need new cashiers, you need new folks in the back, you need another supervisor. So we'll have some operational costs associated to school lunch that I don't think we initially anticipated when we cast the budget a couple of years ago. Because school lunch is usually self-sufficient. So there's $360,000 there. So those are the costs underneath the academies. The contractual increases across all of the salaries that we have and the contracts that we currently have in place, $4.5 million. The restorations, as I mentioned before, positions eliminated from the budget, 3.2. All other new positions that are non-academy and are related to either non-academy, special education, or multilingual learners is $1.1 million. Instilling a competitive para-staffing model is $4.9 million. Some of that money also includes adding additional paraprofessionals, paraeducators at the elementary level. If you remember last year, in the budget book and in the budget request, we did have 45 paras in there. The need for that is not going away, so that is also in this package as well. Some of our sped costs have risen. So outside of the academy, this includes positions for pre-K to 8, and that's $2.8 million. Multilingual learner needs are $1.1. Benefits for all the staff listed on this slide, $4.4. IT improvements and security, 233, so that number could be higher. And then other, so other looks like a big number, but it really is comprised of probably 100 or so much smaller numbers across the budget that add up to another additional increase. And we have that broken out if we want to go over that as well.
Carol, can I ask you, at this point, for convenience, we stop at this point, which is maybe halfway through the presentation, just to go through some of the questions, so it's more timely,
Sure.
rather than wait for the end and we lose the continuity.
Sure. And just this slide just shows the overall budget request, the increase, and the percentage. In the last slide, I'll go over what the percentage would be if we were fully funded last year at 181. You're only talking about around a 7% increase, which is comparable to what the surrounding towns are at. But I'm happy to take questions up to this point.
Rich, want to ask?
I have several, if you don't mind. Your very front page, I guess it was page 1 or 2, you had started to make reference to the lights on budget. And lights on this year versus last year, what are you defining as
Yeah, that's a good question.
the
So-
lights on?
Right, so last year, when we talked about, we'll use the term our roll forward budget.
Mhm.
So that is, if you just took the current budget last year when we presented it, rolled it forward with the contractual increase, that was your lights on. But that terminology, I think, has kind of hurt us in the sense because lights on implies everything's okay, right? We just stay status quo where we're at with this number that we will be whole. And with a growing enrollment, with increased needs, when you say stagnant with the lights on, you're actually losing ground. And so, we struggled a little bit with presenting this budget because if someone were to say, well, what's your lights on? That's the number you gave us last year. It's not our number with the contractual increases. There are true needs, and when the needs aren't met, the lights aren't on. And that's where we're at right now. If you go into almost any building across the district, I think in the last meeting I went so far to say that probably 70% of the problems that I'm dealing with or that CAP deals with is a direct result in some way, shape, or form, not having enough staff, inability to retain staff, not having enough people to do certain things in the way that is efficacious in our work. And we're always, we use the term robbing Peter to pay Paul in many cases. So when we have staff outages, we're pulling staff from other places. So it's not a good way to do business. We're not, the staffing levels here are not meeting the needs of what we need to do. And, for us to make any level of improvement, which we should want to do that, we need to have at least implement this budget and continue to work on increasing staffing where we need it. The state's doing some poking around right now around SRBI levels and ratios. And that's something that's going to come down the line where how many students do you have that qualify for intervention services across not multi-language learners, not special ed, and how many are you servicing, and how many minutes are you servicing them? And that's a tough conversation here because we have great need and our students deserve to have high quality small group instruction. Right now, the small groups aren't small groups. I had someone take some pictures and get some pictures of kids in small group instruction. There was like 12 kids huddled around a teacher. That number should be like 5. So, what we're able to do for students, we can do so much more. We have very skilled educators, very dedicated educators here, but they're burnt out and they're tired, and we could be doing double and triple achievement gains if we had the staffing that we needed to get the job done.
I agree, lights on might have been, but lights on and status quo, I look at it as being synonymous.
Well, status quo,
But I mean,
when you're growing, is actually regression.
well, let me go back, because it becomes confusing to me. Last year we made a presentation, we had the 160 million, and then we had drivers. We kept referring to the 160 as our lights on, and then the drivers what we needed, okay? And then there was another 1 or 2 million at the very end that brought us over to the 181. That was something that I think was put in to move us ahead.
Yes,
Okay, are you now defining the entire presentation we made last year of the 100 and?
that should have been our lights on.
That's what you're referring, okay. I just wanted to, just so I know what to compare it to. All right, so you're saying the lights on is something that is what's a better, so what we're presenting, what's a terminology that what are we calling this? Put it that way.
This is the superintendent's
No, I understand. I understand.
proposed projection of what
Yeah.
we need to operate the school system in an effective manner.
In the terms of lights on or moving ahead or status quo, I mean, it is, where does this budget get us? Let me put it this way.
This is my lights on budget.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Yes, because operationally, we're
That's the
not
point.
efficient right now. We're paying premiums for agencies and services. When we're, in the middle of an audit, we're bringing people in, we're paying a premium because we don't have enough people doing certain jobs and supporting kids in a way that meets the needs that they should be
That's the
getting.
point I'm trying to make, so that we're not presenting anything that's going to move us way ahead into the 21st century
I
or,
have a lot more in here.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be as realistic as possible, but also, sensitive to what the true needs are. I think superintendents walk a fine line between instilling confidence in the public and parents, but also articulating when they have a real need. And I think we do an amazing job with what we have. And our job is always to make sure that students are safe and that their basic needs are met here. But that can't be it, because we have growing needs, right, that we have to keep up with. And in order to be able to provide those services, you have to have staff in the seats. And we cannot attract or retain some staff in key areas because of the level of competitiveness in those certain contracts. So again, staying stagnant with those types of things mean that we continue to lose because we cannot fill certain seats. We're paying out for paraprofessionals, for nurses, office staff that just try to get through audits, trying to get through our regulatory things that we have with the state and federal government. Basic things we have to farm out and pay premiums with agencies because we don't have full-time people here to do them on the daily. And people, just as an example, outside of all of the student needs, operationally, it's hard to get your questions answered here because there's no answer on the phone. And we cut pretty deep into the support staff here as well. So it's not just at the classroom level. That is where the need has to be first, right? First and foremost. But operationally across the system, when you go down past a certain level, you lose the ability to be efficient. And so then, you kind of hit a precipitous decline in your ability to service and maintain what you're doing. So for us, this budget represents need, doesn't represent all the wants. We've had some meetings before, it was like, you can have all the staff that you want. It's going to be irresponsible for me to list all the staff that we want, that we think we need to, raise our achievement points 10 points in the same budget. So this is a combination of trying to be as responsible as possible to articulate what we need across the district and to keep that need on the table.
and that's the point I was trying to drive home, was the impact of what's necessary here. I look at it, because of the past, we have done so much to cut that, for lack of a better word, we became like substandard. And the best illustration I can think of is the fact of the hiring, that we have to go to outside sources to pay premiums to hire. It is not a luxury that we incorporate in the budget. So to emphasize, all I was trying to do is to try to emphasize your point, that this is what you, as the district, as the superintendent, and your staff, and the kids to get a benefit, need to be, we need to sort of catch up in funding the district.
And stay competitive. We have a lot of teachers, we have a couple high school teachers behind me. People are teaching 6 classes.
Yeah.
Not because, at some point that, it's very difficult to teach 6 classes. All the classrooms are maxed out. And so, if we're able to find staff and fill persistent vacancies, and some of the things that we're doing are a little bit more competitive, things like that don't happen. Good teachers don't burn out. So there's a kind of a cycle of that's happening right now between not being able to fill persistent vacancies, not being able to constantly turn over. The cost of constantly hiring staff, onboarding them, and then losing them, and then backfilling them with subs is like, that is what people are spending so much time on. I can't even begin to describe how wasteful that is.
I'm a firm believer of, confessing the way it is. It may be embarrassing, but I keep saying, continue to say, the straw that broke the camel's back happened, a few years ago, and I think we've got to paint the picture to the public as to what it is in the day, a life in the day of a teacher in the classroom. You mentioned it earlier in the slides in terms of the impact or the practicality of teaching, 25 kids that have a diversified learning skill or learning levels. People have to understand what you're up against, what it means, the fact that we're shortage on teachers, the fact that we can't provide certain services. It may be embarrassing, but this is a fact. I mean, the fact remains, if they don't know about it, and can't support it and give us the funds, it makes your job impossible in order to do it. So that was my concern, was to expand on the narratives as to what these numbers mean and how it's affecting your ability to organize staff. Thanks.
Juanita?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Do I
Yes.
need to put my mic on?
Yeah, I can hear you. I don't know how it translates at home, so it'll be mine is best.
Okay. I just want to piggyback a little bit on Rich. One of the things that we've discussed in the past is being able to have the same wording, same vocabulary as we begin to advocate for the budget. So I think, I'm not sure, but I think he was asking, give us some wording, give us,
Sure.
so that we're all
Yep.
using the same lingo. The other challenge, that I'd like perhaps for you to speak to, I find it a challenge that many people do not understand the Board of Ed, Danbury Public Schools budget. They often come from a background where this is the budget, this is what we have, and it's pretty firm and solid. Ours is fluid, and it is even though we go in with a number, we have to somehow get our community to understand that it's constantly changing. And so that the only constant that we have is change.
This is true.
And so oftentimes people are in a box of, this is what you asked for, this is what we gave you, why couldn't you work within that box? And so I'm not sure how we can get the message across that it's a constant change in needs, operations, and everything else that goes
Thank you
into
for saying that, Juanita, because, every year, this is a snapshot right now of what we believe we need today based on the information and the data that we have available to us. But on any given year, we've had to add 3 or 4 or 5 elementary teachers. We've had to add a couple of extra buses over the summer because the routes change and we cannot simply service across certain areas. One bus is 80,000 now, so it was 70, it's almost 80 now. We're one to add a bus into our line. When you add a classroom teacher into the mix, so if one school suddenly needs 4 fourth grade teachers instead of 3, and all the other districting is not an option, you're going to hire a teacher, so throw $85,000 or $95,000 on that. In addition, a whole classroom setup, which comes out of a supply budget, and that's probably about 10 or 15,000 right there, to get them caught up to speed. So every time, we put a budget together, I wish that we could have and all the things we don't know that are going to happen, but that happens every single year. We have to hire teachers. Sometimes we take teachers offline or we redistribute, because enrollment changes. But more often than not in this district, we're adding teachers in. After the spring, we start to see who is coming here, and who tends to be in which school. There's always costs to that are requirements. There's materials, there's all of that. We have out-of-district placements. Special education is a wild card in every district, not just here, but the larger the budget, the larger the district, the more wild of a card you can be dealing with at scale. And those districts, whether we get a certain amount or not, we have to service the kids that count. We have to figure it out. Whether or not Kelly has it in her budget, if 3 students that move from district that need an outplacement, we have to figure that out. That comes out of our bottom line. So it is dynamic. The budget that's here is a snapshot in time. We have probably a list of, I don't even know how many items of unplanned expenses for the year, things that break, things that go bump in the night, staffing that, a lot of illness, just a teacher at the teacher level. So you're paying a teacher's salary while you're also finding the long-term, you're basically paying for 2 teachers. And we have a lot of those here, and that number has been growing, so those are never budgeted for. You can budget for some of those things, but, so every district has a level of dynamic fluctuation. But again, the larger the district, and particularly the growing district, that fluctuation is always unfortunately on the wrong end for us. We deal with that.
Terry?
You show the $7,500 that we got after the budget last year being included in this budget.
75.
75.
7.5.
7.5.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
7.5, excuse me.
Thank you.
Isn't it kind of crappy that we start at the 160 on this budget to show a $34 million increase instead of starting at the 167.5?
One-time funds.
I know it's one time, but that's what we got.
Like
And,
a grant.
I mean, it just looks so big, that number.
It does, but some of the staff, so I'll give you an example, it's a good question. So like the media specialists and the instructional coaches, they're in at 7.5, remember we restored them?
Yeah,
So
right.
we have them in,
Right, no, I'm
in
not
our
arguing
past,
with that. It's
they're
just
restored.
that starting at the base of 160 as opposed to
It
167.5.
makes the number we need to get to that much greater.
Yeah,
It's a whole,
that's,
like we're in a
yeah,
hole. Yes.
yeah, it's much greater.
Yes,
Much greater.
That's right. Kelly just pointed out a good point, that it's the same thing that we dealt with ESSER and ARPA money.
Yeah.
Is that coming off that $20 million or whatever that number was, you have to back out of that number and start for, 20 million back to get to your number. So it's the same concept, just at a much smaller scale, but it still hurts nonetheless when you're going from 160 to 194.
The appropriation is 160, they can't, for
Correct.
nothing being changed, they
Yes.
can't go lower than that, so it'd be misleading to what the
Yes.
other thing is. Can I just ask that on your page number 13, that there be a total on there? I might have assumed that totals $34 million, where the budget drivers,
We could add total to that. We put it on the next page as a,
were just on the bottom of
yep, absolutely.
giving it to Juanita's point, your comment made on the snapshot, I think, again, that's a very valid and important criticism to make. One could argue that if you put everything in your budget, wishful thinking, you got everything you put in the budget, but these things happen, these things that would occur after the fact, and you didn't have funds for it, somebody could say, well, you never told me about it, but put it in. So I think it's and what I'm trying to get at is, I think for so long, we never really opened up and explained fully what we were doing. Maybe it's a matter of being afraid to ask for too much or an embarrassment, but at this point here, I think the more the public knows what you're up against and what these numbers mean, the more significant the conversation is to them.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I am now on page 15 in the packet. And this was just, if you remember how we laid out the budget last year, moving from left to right in terms of our numbers. You look at the bottom, green, the total at the bottom. Folks seem to like the left to right reading to see how we reach the 194, 464. So we did this last year, so we thought it might be helpful to break it out this way again, just another way of looking at it. I won't spend too much time going through all of this because I have all the details behind it. But this is just another way of looking at where certain expenses fall on the description side on the left and compared to along the drivers on the top, moving left to right. So with that, flip the page to the next one. I'm certainly happy to answer questions there, but I think a lot of the questions you might have.
Yeah. Okay, I think we should move along and then
Move along?
questions.
Okay, so I won't go, so then not go through all of every position in here. Do you want to just take time to digest this?
Yeah.
What's here? Okay, so the first page 16 and 17, there's actually 2 pages of the academies. So you'll see some of these supports, the administrative staff that's in there, the staffing plan for the folks who need to be staffed in there, along with the operational staff that is needed. Okay, there's 2 pages there. We total up the health benefits, the building maintenance costs, transportation is in there, fuel, utilities, etc. So the total there was $10,043,000. Okay, on page 18, I did just list out the projected enrollment for 10th and 11th. I mean, you can see there's, a placeholder for 12. We have 800 students over there next year, remaining via DHS. If you go to page 19, that's just one line item, that's the contractual obligation, so that's the roll-up of contracts, anticipated contracts. And then the restoration, so this gets to your 7.5, Teresa, so those coaches and whatnot, those are in the restorations here. The restoration of the assistant superintendent for teaching and learning position, media specialist, 2 elementary principals, security coordinator, which is desperately needed, administrative support desperately needed, SIAP coaches, we offloaded 3 SIAP coaches into the federal grant. That is a 1-year grant. And so at the end of this year, we'd like to bring those back. Those were part of the reduction. And then, of course, benefits. These are the restored positions that existed. New positions on the next page on 21. We need a recruiter desperately for staffing and to help keep up with what we're dealing with right now. And then someone in benefits. Right now we have 1 person in benefits with no.
And almost 2,700 people being managed.
Yeah, and could be calling or emailing on any given day or with special issues and circumstances. So we're severely understaffed there. It's no secret we needed some support in the finance office. We are paying outside services right now at premium, and we desperately need a senior accountant on staff to keep up so we don't end up being behind again. There's a lot of feedback around making sure we keep up with reconciliations, monitoring all kinds of accounts that we have. Student support specialists, the amount that we have right now is, I mean, I could have 12 could have 15 in here right now. We have 4, and that's to add an additional student support specialist in our largest K-5 schools. Right now, we only have 1. So a quick example is a school like Great Plain has 1 student support specialist, and a school like Ellsworth has 1 student support specialist. So the need to support students and have their intervention needs met, particularly in Tier 3, which are severe needs, we're just not there, and we desperately need to have a couple extra positions there. We put 3 elementary teachers in for enrollment. People have some needs across the system, across the 13 schools. That's a little bit of a placeholder. We have some spots that we can identify right now that could go up. And we are really in need, we're on our 2nd year of potential corrective action plan at AIS. We're going to be losing money at this point in terms of revenue and tuition dollars. So it makes sense for us to have some student outreach liaison, almost like a student recruiter, but without using the word recruiter, to help get into these communities, to help post some more things, and to help onboard, to bring students into the district so that we can meet our quotas for outside participation for 20,000, and then the benefits for those staff that are there. The competitive para-staffing model, page 22. So by increasing the salary floor of that contract, I think we'll need about $2.3 million. I know that's a big ask, but very much needed. When we go from school to school to talk to teachers, talk to administration, that is a root cause of so many issues, not having those paraeducators in place where we need them the most. And this will help to correct it, will help to bring us somewhat more competitive in line, not all the way, but a good step in the direction that we need to go. By the way, there's a legislative bill that was just proposed to have paraeducators, what was the salary?
It was as high as 35. It's been bouncing around for about a year.
Right, so there's across the state, the salary of those particular staff class. There's a big call to increase that.
Will they give us the money for that?
No, that's the complaint, but, you know, in the absence of doing something, you know, we're the ones that suffer the cost of that, so we have to do something about that. The K-5 intervention educators, we had 45, that ask was in the budget last year. That ask is not going away, we desperately need more hands on deck at K-5, and then the benefits for those positions above are at 1.2, so that's a good one. Page 23, special education, there are some needs there. Certainly Kelly can answer any questions that anybody has, but this is just to keep up with the current enrollment, and also some of the needs have changed, and some of the services, cost of doing business has gone up. Our MLL population that we know is on the rise. We have a need across the system. These are similar to special ed. These are mandated services that our students are legally entitled to. So we have a need for some Spanish and Portuguese at Danbury High School, 5 bilingual paraeducators across K-8, a second language, multilingual learning department head. With the growing number of staff that we have, there's a need to help with observations, but more importantly with some of the coaching across 13 elementary schools, 8 school liaisons. The reason why they're in this bucket and not in the restore, if you remember we had family liaisons in the budget last year, is that they were in a grant, and that grant went away. They are a vital component to helping to close the loop on meeting family and student need. And we hear quite a bit how valuable those positions were, and that things are quite the same since we lost those in the budget. Those are the benefits associated with that. On page 25, under benefits, the cost of our maintaining our current benefit structure, health dental, life, workman's compensation, come to 4.47, an increase. That's another driver. Workman's compensation went up, employment compensation went down a little bit. I can answer some of those questions if need be. On page 26, IT and network security, again, we had a lot of our need met through grants this year. Thankfully, above and beyond that, computer and supplies, tech repairs, some things that we moved off to grant, credit for 233. Other 1.8 building repairs and maintenance support. So these This column here, this page, there's several, many little things that feed into this number. That's why they're all kind of lumped together under the other. Transportation adjustments, so some contractual increases, non-pub cost are increasing the number of homeless students that need transportation. Alarms and security, utility increases, $22,000 increase for statute increases. Very small numbers, could be 100, 300, but just things that went up with line items across. That total 199. Page 28, sorry if I'm flying through, I'm just trying to read the room here a little bit. Page 28 is just a breakdown of proportionality on the increases by category. And then page 29 is just an understanding, our total budget is 194,464. It's an increase of 21%. 5% of the budget is dedicated to the academy. That's also enrollment. And the actual increase over, if we were fully funded last year, 181, would only been 7.2%. So we would be far more in line with other area districts in terms of our percentage increase if we were just keeping up with the pace of what we need to do here to be minimally operational. So with that, I talked fast for this last couple of times, I'm happy to take questions. And I'll look to Louise to help. She can see the whole room, of course. Yeah.
Dr. Kizengaro, thank you very much for presenting us with all this information in such detail, a good solid breakdown so we can understand sort of the mechanics of each of these things and how they're contributing. I really appreciate that you included this last page with our 24-25 ask and the percent increase over that request. And the reason for that is on another one of your slides, you allude to the fact that we are dealing with a decade of underfunding of our budgets, our budget requests. And so I bring that up because I think it's important for people to understand that every time that we as a community decide we're not going to make the necessary investment that is requested from our superintendent to make sure that we are meeting needs, that we are digging a bigger and bigger hole for ourselves. So the sooner that we as a community can address this and start to make the investments that we need in our education system, the more likely we are going to get the results we're looking for in student achievement and also in community health. So thank you.
Thank you.
Terry?
I just want to, for the record, to remind the board in 22-23, the board was fully funded when last minute additional funds are needed, but 150 million was fully funded in 22-23. I want to point that out.
Rich?
Here on page 19, the category contractual increases, 4 million, 4.5 million. What is that based on? Is that just solely based on existing salaries? Or?
The question is, what is the contractual increase comprised of? So I'll take the order, Mike.
So we looked at our current budget and what our run rate is. We're projected to be on budget at the end of the year for about $90 million budget. And we added a percentage to that. And that percentage is reflecting of conversations I had with Kim about where some of the other increases are coming throughout the state of Connecticut.
So as a percentage, you would take the 4.5 over the 90 million?
On average.
Okay. And then the other salaries wouldn't have any contractual increases because they're too new for us. Is that correct? In your schedule on page number 15, where you have it laid out what I'm going to qualify drivers, you've got $20 million for salaries, and then in each of the drivers you've got salaries. Those salaries that are in there, would I assume they're all basically new from some, or transferred from some other grant position that really don't impact a contractual increase? Just want to make sure that we're calculating it based on.
Yeah, so the 90 million is what the roll-up is, right? That is
Right, it's currently what your payroll is, yeah.
But the restored positions is sort of the average, like how we come up with those salaries is the average of the position. You know, by position, the average salary of that position. New positions, we use a kind of a marked figure for where we've been hiring. So we wouldn't add another roll up on top of that. Those numbers represent the numbers if we were to hire starting July 1st. That's
Okay, so it's like I said,
the target number we would use.
and
yeah.
then on page 26, where you have the pie chart, the contractual increases of 13%, I would assume would include not only salaries, but the bus contracts or whatever other contractuals
Correct.
you have in there. Is that correct?
Page 28.
Yeah,
That the contractual increases are inclusive of
or
all
28,
other
yeah.
increases.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
I want to take a look at page 15 and at the same time, page 21. I think, Kara, that as you were speaking, you did say that you've met with each of the principals.
So the finance team has all the principals.
Right, of the finance team, with each of the principals, and basically getting it down to needs
Needs.
over wants.
Correct.
So I just need to make sure that when we're talking about principals and buildings and programs, that we are including the Reach and Endeavor program, that we're not putting that under our middle schools and high schools because students are filtered in from those locations. And so when I go to additions, when it says student support specialists, I would hope that that would include or an additional, in addition to providing the supports that are needed for that program. And I know that we have special needs students there as well as our students who have been mandated there.
So just to clarify, and it's a, thank you for bringing that up, the 4 student support specialists that we have here, we had slated for K-5 to our 4 largest elementary. I did memorize that I could add 12 more onto this line, I would. And certainly we can revisit as we do the budget, but this is to really get to smaller groups, smaller targets. And some of the schools, particularly in the programs that you mentioned, they're already at a smaller number, staff to teacher ratio. So this is the 4 that are here on the bare minimum to meet service needs that we are seeing at elementary. Now this is an interesting position. This was I don't know, maybe 3-4 years ago. Adding these positions in was an extremely important thing to do. And these are game changer positions for a lot of kids. And I would definitely allocate more into this line, and I can still do that or wants to have that conversation. Yeah.
Terry?
These are union positions. We haven't seen the non-union positions, the budget for that.
So those are, some examples of a non-union position. You have like an HR recruiter or benefits would be an exempt staff, if that's what you're referring to. Potentially this outreach, this $20,000 outreach that would be kind of considered an exempt position, ones that are quite fall into a union
Well, we got
category. So
that
there's
list,
a few on here.
the list of non-union staff in the budget. that
You
we
know,
got in
that
the
thing that always
students'
drives us crazy, the exempt, as I was calling it.
Yes.
It's the, every year it's
Yes.
later on in the year after the budget's passed, there's a list of personnel that doesn't, it's not part of any bargaining group.
Yep.
And I think we amended, if I'm not mistaken, the bylaws to say that list should be provided at the time of the
With
budget.
this, we can certainly put a schedule together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
you can certainly put that in.
yeah.
And certainly some of the positions, that we're trying to restore, like for example, a security coordinator would be on that list, so we can run a list now of the positions that we have, and maybe run a list of what positions, should the budget goal be fully funded, you know, this or
Right.
that.
It was always a sticking point that we
Yep.
spent hours and hours talking about.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
okay.
including the raises.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna ask you. To that point, would that be covered under the contractual increases?
Yes.
Would it be folded into that number?
Yes.
Be nice to see. Thank you.
The COLA.
No, not COLA number contractually, so the 4.5,
Yeah, that's
that's
all.
all salaries that everybody in the district. So the 4.5 million under contractual increases, that assumes all groups, all categories of staff.
Mhm. If I had all the money to give you, and I was the one that was gonna give you the $190 some odd million, one of the questions I would ask would be, if I don't give it to you, what impact it's gonna have? And maybe that's, I keep drawing out this thing here. You need something to work with. If you don't get this, how are you going to educate the kids in Danbury? It's, as you said before, you've got a population of students, you've got to educate them, you've got to provide services. Without this funding, what you're saying is strictly needs, all right? What impact is this going to have on your ability to run this district?
Clearly, it's diminished student outcomes, so it inhibits our ability to reach students' academic needs, meet students where they're at. Class sizes go up, intervention levels, the number of students who are able to service go down. We'd be in a state of compliance as opposed to being able to affect change across the district. And by compliance, I mean the bare minimum required to check the box that we're doing something in maybe a legal area, which I would never say is satisfactory or something we want to do. In some places, that's what we're doing now, which is not acceptable. I always worry about student safety and security and making sure that everything that we need in the schools, what we have. But, you know, we can't move kids forward. And quite frankly, let's put the kids' piece aside for a second. They're obviously the most important. But on the teacher side,
Right.
if we're spinning our wheels trying to fill teacher positions because we can't remain competitive, or if we're spinning our wheels because we have high staff call-out rates, because the conditions in the class have deteriorated, teachers are exhausted, and they're human beings. If we can't fill those needs, we are just in a downward spiral. And so learning in the classroom doesn't happen. I can tell you, when we have subs, we have some wonderful subs. I will never take away some amazing people that come to our school system every day on behalf of kids and try to contribute to learning. But in no way, shape, or form is it a substitute for their classroom teacher who knows exactly where everybody is in real time and where they need to be. And when the staff rates go up, learning slows down and is stalled. And if a student gets through half or 2/3 of what they were supposed to learn in a year because a third of the year they spent with a substitute teacher or a long-term sub or a classroom that was out of control because a couple students who needed support with self-regulation had no one in the classroom to help them. So the conditions in the classroom are such that learning is more challenged. All of those things play into the end result at the end of the school year. I know we have 4 schools that were schools of distinction this year. In the last couple of years, I think we had one year we had 8, and then the year before that. So we know what the formula is for success here. We know how to get growth. But it's getting harder because the need, we're trying to tread water with the student need, but we're also, we know there's some formulas that work. Some of our smaller schools where we have one of everything in compliance, we're actually able to get some good growth. some decent leadership, and you apply some leadership, apply some support, some coaching, we see growth in some of these schools. When you go up the ladder and student enrollment is higher, and we only have the check the box on compliance for services, you're not gonna get any growth. You're gonna get treading water. You're gonna be able to say that you've complied and you have X in place. But I caution the cost of not funding us is far greater down the road in terms of the number of students you're going to have to support in this community who can't find gainful employment, or who drop out, or who aren't in school long enough to benefit from what it is that we can actually offer here. And so, the real estate values in the city could be different than what they are. They're pretty decent now because the rest of the world is dealing with the same type of real estate inflation, if you will. But I have a daughter, she's 20, she's going to be 27 soon, she's engaged to be married. And she and her soon-to-be husband, her fiance, they're driving around towns looking for, they're not trying to buy a school, buy a house, they're trying to buy a school system, right? We talked about what that means for people and what they're willing, the conversations around what they're willing to pay for a house in a good school system where the outcomes have there's a certain caliber of outcome, guaranteed outcome that seems to persist in certain communities. And the value of real estate is just higher in those areas, and that's good for everybody. And so if we don't maintain some positionality here with what we're able to offer, I am concerned about that for the community, but also more concerned about what we're doing for kids.
But also on your staff, the ability or inability to hire and retain staffing becomes an issue without this particular funding. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Which basically starts and creates all of the problems. I had a note in here, one of the slides you had made reference to the outside services. I think would be a good point for referential to put in the dollar amount that we spend, so it shows what the problems we're faced with, and the fact that we're paying a premium for something we shouldn't do when money is so tight, that we can be using this money, for a better position, but because of circumstances, we're not in that position.
If I could just add, if you turn to the special ed slide, there's a $300,000 line item, and that's the markup, and that's after vacancies. So what I mean by that is, we've had, for example, a certain number of para-tutor vacancies, and we're able to hire some contractual services within that budgeted amount, but there's less people there because they cost more. On average, it's about a 30% markup on any of those contractual services. So, a $100,000 employee costs us $130,000. There's also, not just the straight cost, but there's a training element to that, a newness to the district, the fact that they're not always obligated to participate in our professional development, our teacher evaluation system, all those other things. So there's a greater cost to that. So we have seen that in the nursing area. We've hired some contracted services. We still have 1 or 2 open vacancies, which has helped offsetting that. We've definitely seen that with some of the special ed paraeducators and a few other isolated positions that we've needed to fill. So there's certainly the monetary cost of about a 30% markup, and then there's some other things that are felt across the board.
I bring that up because from time to time, it's always been mentioned, if you didn't do this, you could have another FTE, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're talking in terms of the millions of dollars that we're spending or whatever it is, it's a point that we can drive home, is that this is something that we're better off having internally. And yes, with that much more money, it would supplant some of the requests we get. But those are some of the challenges that you're faced with.
The other thing too, I just want to add is, as a matter of labor relations, we are displacing bargaining unit folks, and so it is with the grace and the compromise of our union leaders that we enter into these limited agreements to get these kinds of outsourced employees, and it's because they recognize, for example, with safety advocates, we run the risk, if we don't have those folks in place, of some real security issues. And so, you know, we've put union leaders in the position of saying, I don't want to be the one to say that, you know, we wouldn't agree to you getting limited help here. But it really is, you know, by their grace and their negotiation with us that they've agreed that, you know, we're having difficulty filling these spots. And so while their preference, as ours is to have true bargaining unit members, right now it's that, or, you know, it's a sub or nothing. And so we're trying to really always walk that line with them. The other thing I just wanted to say in listening to the conversation is I think one of the things we didn't mention that you've heard me say before is we have 5 non-certified contracts that will expire on June 30th. And that's a lot of uncertainty, more than what we normally have. Usually we have a couple, but because we entered into quite a few of the one-year agreements last year in an effort to get through what was a really strenuous budget year this past year, we're going back in with all of those folks, as well as with teachers for the following year. So we have a pretty heavy schedule, but a lot of uncertainty because and that's a large percentage of our workforce. Terry?
Back on page 5, the projected open and the overall enrollment for 25-26. Given the recent political climate, are you sure about that number? You know, give or take a little bit? Because I'm hearing stories, people are leaving. Some people are leaving. For example, the wildfires out in California, they need to rebuild. Finding jobs out there, that type of thing. But that's a pretty good projection.
So, yeah, this is a demographer projection. We have always surpassed our demographer projections, but we use it because it's a number that's all vetted. And you know, we always expect some fluctuation around that number. This year could be interesting to say the least. Well, we're not sure. You know, the things happening across the country, you know, could be, I don't want to speculate, they could be exiting larger cities, moving to other places. So it's really hard to predict. You know, we're going to expect an increase, anyways, a little bit of rebound effect of the kindergarten folks that will probably come back to us. You could have some students who maybe went to private kindergarten and they're going to try to re-enter in first grade, and we'll see them in first grade. So we could still be dealing with some variables here. It's really hard to say, but we're pretty used to having a couple hundred student variable from year to year, regardless. But it will be interesting to see how some of this plays out here.
The first thing I just wanted to talk about real quick is the actual numbers. I just did some quick add on my phone calculator here. And I'm coming up the $700 difference for the Academies of Danbury number. The school lunch line is not listed in our presentation. It's on page 13. The school lunch line doesn't appear on ours, so I just added it in and then I added those numbers real quick. And I'm getting $10,044,196. It's a $700 difference. I'm splitting hairs a little bit here, but I just want to make sure our numbers are accurate, because that does bump our increase by $700.
We will go back and check that for sure.
My math could be bad. I did do it twice. So.
We're still looking for staff count, so if you're right, maybe come back to you for a job.
I'm not ready yet. I'm looking at slide 12 though, at the ARPA $7.5 million, and again, I really appreciate that you've laid out all this information so we can understand that investment. I noticed that there are some things on here that are not one-time events, right? Like,
Oh, 100%.
we have some positions that are built in here.
So if you recall, when that money kind of came in, you know, the last Hail Mary,
We made that promise.
the promise to restore staff, and that is what we did.
Right.
Which
is
is
excellent.
exactly what we didn't want to do.
Exactly what I was just gonna say.
Yes,
You know,
but-
we've
but-
been trying to avoid that.
Yes, they are here, and they are all needed. And
So I guess the point being that, like, you know, look, just as we went through with the situation with the ESSER funds from COVID before, you know, we're still gonna have some level of financial cliff just by virtue of how we're spending the $7.5 million now. I just want to say that out loud at the table for everybody.
yes, and we did incorporate, so some of these staff that are here are incorporated in the restore. Because if you were the media specialist or the instructional coach, right? So they're part of the restore to come back. So we've accounted for them in the larger picture to return back to us. And then the staff for the enrollment, I mean, come out of high water, we need those staff numbers, so we have to figure that out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Juanita?
On page 15, the proposed budget, Kara, I know that I believe we have a number of buildings that we actually rent or lease. Where would I find those? In which category?
Yeah, where are rentals booked, other purchase services?
Property services.
Purchase property services. Please hold.
Okay.
Kara, some, like preschool, are built into grants as well. Or
Correct, yes.
The,
They are in here, Juanita.
Yeah, it's 4 lines down, page 15, for just property schools.
You can get back to us.
Yeah.
You get back to us.
Did I hear a rumor that we can't use this for, once we move out, that we can't use this building for?
So we could use it. It's just, we don't pay $13 million. It is this building, we put the cost of repair in the capital plan, capital list, what's it called, plan. To repair this building, to bring it ADA compliant, student ready, to adjust it to the needs of the students we would want to bring here, which would be Reach and Endeavor, it would cost $13 million to fix this building. That was a number that blew us away.
That's not on here.
No, it's in another, and so we were quite disappointed with that number.
But we got rails, ADA.
There's bathroom separation, you've got multiple programs, you've got different grade levels, you have to kind of section off certain areas and create classrooms where there aren't, where there's offices, so it requires some extensive, but some of the bigger issues here are like plumbing and electrical, and this building needs far more than we anticipated. They started to do some work last year. We've been out, if you recall, there are no offices in the basement because of the additions from the flooding last time we were here, so a lot of remediation needs to take place.
if I could just add though, it's still, it's still a need though for the program. That's our goal
Right,
is
yeah.
to, just to get back a little bit earlier to your question, Juanita, is to continue to improve and grow the program. Reach Endeavor has not changed in student enrollment in quite some time. As our district has grown quite significantly, that's certainly a need, but in order to grow and develop the program, which would support more kids, we do need to find another site to do so. As the current site, we could not increase enrollment safely. And we also feel that the students in the program deserve to be in a more school-friendly building. And so that is a goal of ours. Right now, we're still kind of looking into other options. So again, that could be something at a later date that comes through as an expense. Right now, though, we have yet to identify where that may be.
Any other?
Most of our rentals are sitting in the rental account, we supervise 540.
And just the
Then
rental.
coffee development is one of our bigger contracts. That's for 43 upstairs and downstairs.
And Crosby Street is in there as well.
Most of them I have to check individually, but yeah.
They will roll forward as well, yeah.
Any other questions from the board, Rich?
quick question, getting back to the page 12, the ARPA money. Of the amount of employees, number of employees, are they only the media and the instructional that we've basically
There's a number for that line that should have been on there, we'll go back and.
Okay, and it was my understanding that this money had restrictions, but one of the restrictions was there was a period of time where it
Right, so the money had to be encumbered by December 30th of this year. And that was taken care of with our work with the city. So we had to outline
Okay.
what it is we would spend money on. We had to fall in line with the ARPA regulations. We had that approved, submitted to the city. They also submitted it, all of it was approved. And we have until 2026 to spend that money. So, we have,
That's okay. So if you could just add the other
the staff
positions.
enrollment.
Yeah. Where, the enrollment there. What I'm trying to do is to coordinate the publicity we had of the 100 people. If we're only saying it's 20 some odd people, you're gonna get a lot of questions. So, and I guess it's one of my
So you're
final.
saying, you're asking how many in that line? Is that what you're asking?
Well, within the category of the 7.5, how much of that on personnel, which is monies that I didn't consider to be, one-time spending. I guess we're going to say, use your official title, Dr. Casimir, is that you and your staff have made, as they say, lemonade out of lemons. You apparently make things look too easy. And what I say by that is, no matter what happened, and it's historically too, we continue to go ahead and we continue to get schools of distinctions, or as we had a number of months ago, the accountability index, which I think is an important index. But I think it was my purpose, a lot of it today was to tell people how it is. We cannot do this anymore. And that's basically it. It may be, it's not embarrassing, but I think it's a fact that over the course of time, we have done so much to trim the appropriations that were given to us. And there were times, I remember in negotiating contracts where it was, we wanted to keep the rate low, but the times were different at that time as opposed to, to what it is now. So, whether we contributed to that or not, it's something else, and you deal with what you have in the present time. But I think it's important to have people understand when you go with these numbers, what they're expecting what they're expecting to get from this, and basically it's not bells and whistles of anything. It's the bare necessity or the needs for your kids. I often say that we get the biggest crowds when you're going to move a bus stop. Why? Because it personally affects them. They understand the impact on their child. When you give all of these 25 pages, it goes over a lot of people's heads, unless there are things that they understand that's going to impact them. But you did a great job. It's a good presentation. We just got to be able to convince the public and the powers to be that we need these funds and can't take any less. Thank you very much.
Do we have any other questions?
Are we expected tomorrow to pass on this?
Yeah, just real quick, excuse me. To Kara's point, Mr. Janelli, you were talking about parents getting support for the budget. I think slide 11 is the best, I don't want to say wake-up call, but impetus to start a movement, if you will. When you look at the parent perspective, when you look at the community perspective, and you look at what needs to happen to do what's right morally and educationally for students, we're about to embark on a world-class academies. We want to be a world-class operation from K-12. And I think there's an opportunity. And just being in all the schools all the time, I can tell you, if you look at the difference in the way that we're staffed between Danbury and this Norwalk Elementary School, that's real, but it's real across the state. It's real across the country. I've been in 6 districts. This is the only one that's staffed this way that I've been a part of. And I see the immense talent doing more with less all the time. But I think it becomes a tired narrative, and I think that leads to the retention component of what we're seeing in the schools. We just have amazing talent that's able to overcome. But I think you reach that boiling point, it's no longer a flicker, it's like a, candlelight. And you see it in the faces of the teachers and staff, and people get burned out. But how could you not when you're looking at the differential right there, And I think we need to be mindful of that as we want to retain the best staff that we have.
Thank you, I agree. I think we're between a rock and a hard place because you've given us this facility, all right, physically, you've given it to us. Now we're saying, give us the other part of your bargain, let us staff. The problem is, if you don't give us this $34 million, something's going to happen, to make this thing work in its entirety, plus the other trickle down effect it's going to have on the operational aspects or impacts on education. So I think we've got, like every year, a hard sell, but more so this year.
Thank you. Any other questions?
There's one other. Tomorrow, are you looking to adopt this tomorrow?
So that's really up to the board. The purpose of the workshop is to give some time to get your questions answered. If you felt strongly about something, then, you needed more time on something, you wanted to dialogue around it. Certainly, my theory on this is if you're comfortable and you don't see anything in there that you want to challenge or rearrange or add on to, you can, to me, it's more helpful. The faster we get the board to approve the budget, the faster we can get out there with it and start to talk to the community more and present it out. I don't want to start a roadshow unless the board has approved, the budget. And it also allows the mayor to start to understand the need so that he can do what he needs to do with it to kind of understand our budget
Pick
as well.
himself up off the floor.
Yeah, I sent him a copy of the brochure. I'll have to check on that after this.
Yeah, I was just considering, we've got 5 out of 11 members, so you're going to go through the same presentation tomorrow.
Maybe a truncated version of it. Maybe, my guess is, we'll send this out digitally to those who aren't here. I certainly didn't expect everybody to just pass the budget and then, from one day to the next, but I would also, at what point do you, should we look at the calendar? Do you need another workshop? I'm happy to entertain what needs to be. This needs to be over at the city by the 13th. So you need to approve it before then. There's not too many days in there. So, but that's at the pleasure of the board and how you want to approach it. We're certainly here to answer questions.
Last time, didn't we invite the mayor's office and the city council to one of our workshops or to talk about it? Didn't we do that? Yeah. I mean, I think we need it.
As a suggestion, considering we only have 5 of the 11, and not to prolong it, but what's your point?
Excuse me,
Yeah,
Go ahead, Gladys.
have everybody finished?
no, I wanted to
Is
finish.
there no more questions?
No, Juanita still has, Rich is finishing and Juanita has a question.
I was just thinking that we don't have to, it may be good, and Teresa's point's well taken, that I'm not sure anything beyond tomorrow's presentation to the rest of the members, assuming we have a full complement, is going to materially change anything in here. But I do think it might be a good point to quickly do an poll, or their finance people and the legislative group, get them all in one time, make a presentation to them and say, okay, we can do one of 2 ways. This is what we're going to present, or the board's adopted this, I leave it up to you and Gladys to decide how you want to give it to them. But I think Teresa's point's well taken. We should do something with the city government and the legislators so we can get them on our side as quickly as possible, and we can explain all of this to them. I'd be very surprised if anything came about that's going to make you change anything here after a conversation tomorrow with the other members. But That's up to you to decide.
It also sounds as if our professional educating staff would want to be supportive, help advocate for it, so that might be another venue. But there were a couple of points that were brought up here tonight for clarification, and I don't know if you took down notes to add or to add some specifics about some points. Yes.
We did, I just wanted to add out the same ones that you're referring to.
Okay, so
Do you have
one of
should we
them
make
was the
a little fact checking now?
it's the exec,
Salary schedule.
the salary,
Schedule?
yes,
Yeah, you have that one?
that Teresa had brought up.
Yeah, okay.
You have it. And I am just looking for information on the buildings that we lease and the cost of those. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Gladys, you want to speak?
Just want to say thank everyone for coming out. I know the weather is not perfect. I thank the superintendent for putting this presentation together for tonight. Those board members, who we as individuals need to continue to encourage them, because this was not something that was just planned in a week or so. This has been on our calendar, okay? So thank you all for your support, and I'll see everybody, I hope, tomorrow. And we have a long day tomorrow.
Thank you, and I just want to say thank you to the cabinet team. There's a lot of long hours that have gone into the preparation of tonight's budget.
Thank you.
And it was very thoughtfully done, and I'm also hoping that this, the diligence with which the budget was put together on the back end will lead to a greater clarity in projections and, for multi-year budgets, which I think will serve us as we build a relationship with the city and for them to understand what our true needs are over time. So I just want to thank the team for all the work that they've put into this presentation.
Thank you. You have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.